This is the OTB Television Network, a service of Capital District Off-Track Betting.
Good morning and welcome to Loose on the Lead. Seth Merrill from Equidaily.com live in the studio. Steve Bick from Sirius and XM's At the Races live from down in the Philly area. He was at Parks yesterday enjoying their very good card of racing. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Seth. Good morning, everybody.
And as I say, you were down at Parks yesterday. Why don't we get right into that, talk a little bit about Parks racing. And I'm just curious, I haven't seen yet an estimate of the crowd down there, the attendance, but just give me an eyeball. What did it look like? How many people? I had a feeling they were going to be, falling from the rafters there with the card they had.
There were 25,712.
Oh, there you go.
No, I'm making that up. I'm just estimating. There was a huge crowd there for that building. I mean, I've only ever been there for some of our horses that Chuck Simon has run, and I've never seen, more than, 1,000 people. So this was quite something, and it was really a great atmosphere. People, whether they were upstairs in the dining rooms or, down on the by the paddock, they've got that very odd sort of tucked in paddock under cover, and people can throng it, and then all the way down the stretch, just the track apron completely full, and it was a gorgeous day, number one, and so it made for a perfect opportunity to be outside, and people had a great time. It was a terrific atmosphere. Certainly Philadelphia Parks Racing has got issues that that are around the other 364 days, but for this day, they had the focus of the industry, and you could really tell that everybody that is involved there, from Sal Sinatra's racing office and racing department through the other trainers and horsemen and owners and people that are there on a year-round basis, they were really proud and pleased, to be hosting the entire sport yesterday, and they did a great job. I didn't see any issues or anybody complaining about the wake lines or service issues and so forth. But for them, it was a mammoth day, and all the glitterati of Philadelphia area racing were there. Mrs. Chapman was on hand, and anybody that you'd want to expect or think would be out, and then people from all over the sport turned up. One of the first people was talking to was Steve Coburn, who will talk to anybody that comes up to him, and he and his wife were rather funny, and he was very stoic about the California Chrome's effort. But it was a tremendous day there, and they should be very proud of the show that they put on. There's some things that they should be doing to improve the product and the signal year round. That's a separate topic. But, other than the racetrack being obviously, way too speed favoring, other than that, it was, I thought, a very nice day of racing there.
And certainly they did do some things right this week, and it was all with the focus of, as you say, the racing industry on Parks. I watched on the America's Best Racing website, I watched the Comcast broadcast, and they brought in Lafitte Pincay Jr. to host that. It was a really nice broadcast, and at one point they were out in the crowd, and they were interviewing some little kids. So it was one of those big day crowds where you had all ages and both sexes, and a lot of people turned out. That was pretty clear. And one thing I also will tip my hat to Parks for, they drew these races on Monday, so they got the buzz on the races all week long.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we pretty much did nothing on the radio but talk about, this circumstance. I mean, you get a Derby Preakness, dual classic winner coming to the Pennsylvania Derby, and then, the rest of that field of accomplished 3-year-olds, and then you have the leading contender for the 3-year-old Philly Championship on hand in the Cotillion. I mean, you're running $2 million races. a Grade 1 in the Cotillion, and this Pennsylvania Derby obviously will become a Grade 1 next year. Between Will Take Charge winning a year ago and Honor and Serve before that, and clearly with the Haskell winner here in Bayern and the rest of that field, and the Derby winner and so forth, they'll be a Grade 1. So you get that kind of a day, and it should be the focus, especially given that this has been their marketing concept for the Derby Cotillion, having a weekend that was in proximity to preparations for Breeders' Cup, as well as having a unique spot on the calendar, and they deserve credit on that. I mean, there's plenty of things you can criticize Philadelphia Park about, but this execution and the strategy that they've employed for this particular day has been very effective.
Yeah, absolutely, and they did a great job. And as I say, the broadcast was a lot of fun to watch, and the racing held up. And let's talk a little bit about the racing. First up, want to pull up the undercard stake that may get overlooked. The Grade 3 Gallant Bob, $300,000. They're going 6 furlongs. Talked a little bit about this race last week because a horse that I really was intrigued with earlier this year was Favorite Tale for Guadalupe Preciado, who was kind of stuck at Parks earlier this year because of the quarantine. Subsequently, though, ripped off 3 nice wins down there. And then when the horse ventured out, still showed those flashes of talent, but just was not validating what he'd done at Parks earlier this year. But the return to Parks, and we're going to watch the stretch run, the return to Parks proved to be the tonic. It will be number 1 Favorite Tale getting it done. But there was another intriguing entrant in here, and that was the number 6 Fast Anna, who will wind up running second. Fast Anna, in only the 3rd career start, had come up to Saratoga from Florida for Kathy Ritvo and ran a really nice second in the Grade 1 King's Bishop behind the Big Beast. Well, Favorite Anna in only the 4th career start, another second in a nice little sprint stakes race. So I thought the Gallant Bob was kind of a nice way to kick off the graded stakes portion of the action.
Oh, there's no doubt. And you have to know, given the way the racetrack was playing up to that point through the first 9 races, you have to know that Favorite Tale was, even without the racetrack playing the way it did, Favorite Tale was going to be the obvious candidate to beat Fast Anna. And, if you're a shoot player, if you use Thorographs, you knew going into this that actually Favorite Tale had run 3 or 4 races that were faster than anything that the Calabrese Ritvo Colt had run. Even that performance that he turned in the King's Bishop wasn't as fast as anything Favorite Tale has run. At least 3 of Favorite Tale's performances from a sheet figure standpoint were faster. So this was a major player. The race was going to come down pretty much to the 2 of them. And, I give Lupe Preciado and Bisono tremendous credit. They were not going to be denied the lead, and Bisono absolutely took over and was in control from the bell and maintained and then started to pull away. And yes, was the track glib and was the inside good for a change of Philly? Yeah, obviously. But this is a nice horse. Got a 104 buyer out of this, too, exceeding that nice 102 that he got when he was running off those 3 wins to start his career. So he does get some validation here coming off of that Jersey Shore where Purdue Bay beat him. Lisa's Song of the Prayer Colt. But they were all smiles, the Preciado team, and this is a real horse. There's no question about that, despite the performances that Woody Stevens, where he ended up, I think, last, and I think one of his other graded stake tries, the Bay Shore wasn't good. But he's now had here at this point in the season, 2 back-to-back nice performances in Grade 3s.
Yeah, and the nice run in the quick call on the grass up at Saratoga, I think, gives him some options going forward. So he'll be one to watch, no question about it. Now let's shift our attention to the 2 marquee events. Grade 1, $1 million Cotillion. We've been talking about this race probably for at least a month. The anticipation has been up there. Now, the unfortunate thing is the Pletcher Rapoli team decided to take a pass with Stop Charging Maria, or you would have had absolutely the 3 main contenders for the 3-year-old filly Eclipse show up, and when they do it outside of the Breeders' Cup, it's always intriguing. But you still wound up with two of the main players, Untappable, the Pro Tem leader in the division, and Sweet Reason, who was coming off a couple of Grade 1 wins, the Acorn and the Test. You and I had Leah Giramati on the show after the Test, and she said they would probably try a couple of turns, and this was going to be one of the options. I think she acquitted herself pretty well at 2 turns, finishing second to Untappable, but a fairly close-up second, given what Untappable has done earlier this year. We'll watch the entire cotillion here, Steve, and it will subsequently be number 8, Untappable, winning. Number 2, Sweet Reason, will run second. Number 7, JoJo Warrior, will run third. But with the return to filly competition, Untappable gets it done in here, and you would have to think now has an absolute stranglehold on that Eclipse.
I agree, and this was a race that she had to work. I mean, when they struck the front and came off the turn, for a moment it looked like, okay, she's going to take control and power away. She did. She basically was stalking 3 wide and lost some ground. But Sweet Reason comes running from behind her and was making some headway, frankly, in the late stages. And so very much the same way that Tapiture in the boys' race ran that sort of hidden, strong, against the bias effort. Sweet Reason had that too. Leah was all smiles. I mean, I saw Leah as she was leaving the viewing area and gave her a shout, and she was delighted with the performance. Sweet Reason, more or less, as you just said, I think validating Leah's confidence in her as a 2-turn horse. I mean, all of us kept saying, this is not, we're going to have to see it to believe it. And we not only saw it, you really have to believe it, given the way the racetrack was playing. Untappable, of these $2 million races, Untappable felt like the horse that, was going to be unbeatable, more or less. And yes, she proves out your winner here, but she had to work at it, and the figure came back kind of middling, 94 buyer, and Tapiture not as good right now as she was through the spring and early summer, but still formidable enough to to handle what we've got as the 3-year-old filly crop right now.
And you also have to wonder, again, she wasn't as impressive as she was earlier this year. That may have been the track she may not take to the Philadelphia Park track. I want to see one more before I'm going to say she's not as potent as she was earlier this year, because this wasn't as impressive as those earlier victories. But, it was the comeback after the Haskell. She did win, so we'll see what happens going forward. All right, let's shift our attention now. Pennsylvania Derby, $1 million Grade 2 event, and as you say, likely on its way to a Grade 1. And Steve, I said on the Handicappers Report earlier, I kind of kicked myself. Last week I talked a lot about Protonico, and I thought that horse was really interesting coming into the race. He threw in kind of a dud, given being in a nice stalking position, then winds up fading 7th in a field of 8. But as they kind of went to the gate, I backed myself up with some exactas that scored, because I thought, how could I use Bayern in the Travers at 5-2 and not use him on Saturday at 7-2? And I had said last week, a 1 1/8 at Monmouth is different than 1 1/8 everywhere else, so he still had to prove it a little bit. But at that price, he just became so attractive. So I kind of kicked myself that I hadn't been a little higher on him last week. Tapiture, I've liked since early in the year. He did throw in the dud in the Kentucky Derby, but Tapiture I thought ran well to be second. Obviously, the disappointment in here was the fade late in the race from California Chrome, winding up 6th in the field of 8 as the 4-5 favorite. But, Steve, as we watch it, and again, we'll watch the entire race here, number 4, Bayard, it was all over when they put up that first fraction of 24 and change. Number 7, Tapiture will run second. Number 2, Candy Boy will run third. What were your impressions of the Pennsylvania Derby?
Well, there's quite a few things going on in here, and we'll start with the winner. And you put a line through his 2 races in the classic distance category, the Preakness and the Haskell, the Travers. Put a line through those 2 and take a look at his form from 1 1/8 and down to 7 furlongs. This is a classic Stafford stretch out, sprint speed route goer, a middle distance type that when he gets any further support that he probably really doesn't need from the racetrack is going to be very formidable. I'm sure Baffert will entertain running in the Breeders' Cup Classic, but I'm sure he'll end up settling on the dirt mile instead, and then maybe think next year as the horse matures about getting him back to a classic distance. But I mean, this is a horse that is like Moreno, and we talked, of course, between Travers and the Woodward at the end of Saratoga, that same story about what do you do with horses like this that are free running and are a catch me if you can type, and you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. And for all of the bluster from Kenny McPeak, CJ's awesome, we're going to go take it to him. He chased and he ran credibly, from an outside post, but he never really seriously went after Bayern. He never really, challenged him and went head to head with him. And so, ultimately, as they, made their way past about the halfway in the race, maybe, with a half mile to go, CJ's Awesome was starting to back up. Meantime, you talk about Protonico. All Protonico did in this race was make it impossible for Victor Espinoza and California Chrome to get out from inside. And yes, the inside was good, and some people have speculated that maybe they made the inside good to favor California Chrome, and all it did was make it easier for Bayern, who you knew was going to get the lead here. In the meantime, it didn't do anything for California Chrome because he's pinned down inside. It's been proven now repeatedly. Whenever he has not run well, it's been from that position, down inside, in amongst horses, the inability to, have a kind of a free running opportunity. And it's not a scenario that plays well for this particular horse. Probably, could certainly have used the race as well. But from where he was pretty much in trouble. And then when they came off the turn, probably, in retrospect, Victor Espinoza would have done well to stay on the rail, because all you have to do is watch the replay and see Candy Boy, who was way too far back early. I don't know what was on Rosario's mind in having Candy Boy basically shuffled back and wrangled back at some point to the back of the pack. I mean, he was a horse that should have been sitting mid-pack and saving ground down inside, because he comes rallying up that good rail pass. And I actually could have really used him second. I keyed him first and second. Needed that or Noble Moon to get up to third. But, with all these working parts about the racetrack, it wasn't going to matter, because Bayern was, as you said, was gone. 24 flat, 47-4, 110-4. Forget it. You're not going to beat this horse at 1 mile and an eighth in that kind of scenario. In the same way that you don't, horses like Moreno and It's My Lucky Day are going to be murdered at 9 panels under those kinds of circumstances. Tapinger, I thought, continues to acquit himself very handsomely. He was chasing from the outside and did well. Candy Boy, is a nice multiple grade stake place type. And Leah, I don't think, was disappointed with Noble Moon trying to rally. I mean, he and Candy Boy came from the furthest back positions to make up ground on a track that was hard to make up ground. But again, they were all, a half a dozen lengths in arrears of the winner. So a resounding triumph. People are going to try to diminish Bayern's resume by saying he benefited from speed favoring tracks at Monmouth and at Philadelphia. Okay, fine, so be it. If you want to view him that way, that's this is like something new. This is a new circumstance that these racetracks are glib on big days. Everybody acts so shocked and surprised. That seems to be the MO year in, year out, venue to venue. But it doesn't take away from a 111 buyer and a new track record. It's still impressive.
Yeah, it absolutely was impressive, no question about it. And again, interesting race, both of those from the 3-year-old fillies and the 3-year-old boys. A little bit late in the summer season, and sets things up for continued interesting storylines into the fall. Steve, anything more you want to touch on from Parks before we take a break and get to some news?
Tina lost $80 at the casino, and believe me, I'm not happy. She at one point she was up like $30, and I tried to get her to walk away, and no. And the woman next to her was $1,300, and a $30 profit wasn't good enough for her. So
just be happy it wasn't the nest egg like the Albert Brooks movie. And then you walk in, you talk to the casino owner, and hey, it'd be good publicity if you gave me my money back.
We had a great time getting here Friday night. I haven't been to Philadelphia for a number of years. I was an Eagle season ticket holder for over a decade. Going to my first game in the new building today. We're going to see the Eagles Skins at 1, and just have had a delightful time. It's just been a great weekend.
Very good. All right, we'll take our break here. A little bit later on, I have Lynn Schneerson coming in. She's been covering the Suffolk situation for the Daily Racing Forum, so we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But after this break, we'll come back and touch on some of the week's news with you. So here's our break. When we come back, Steve Vick still on the phone. Seth Merrow in the studio. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more Loose on the Lead right after this.
Sepper kicking clear, and Sepper is pulling away impressively.
Hysterical Lady Ginger Punch to win it.
And it's Wilco in front, and he's going to pull off a huge upset here.
But it's Round Pond going on to take the distaff.
Awesome again. Sire of 10 Grade 1 winners, 4 Breeders' Cup champions, and 4 multimillionaires, standing at Adena Springs.
Face it, most horse racing websites are just too much clutter, too much to navigate through. Next time, log on to CapitalOTB.com. Our newly designed website is easier than ever to use, with all the information the professional horse player needs. CapitalOTB.com.
It's more than just a sports bar. It's Stadium Cafe. Located at 389 Broadway in Saratoga, it's the place to be for great times and great food. Their menu features everything from gourmet entrees to your favorite wraps and sandwiches. Or maybe you just want to grab a beer and catch the game. So what could be better than that? How about 2 Stadium Cafes? There's also the Westside Stadium, right up the road at 112 Congress Street. Same great menu, same great service. Whether you're hanging at the bar or just relaxing outside on their spacious covered patio, you'll always leave knowing you'll be back again.
We love, above all, the staff. We love Dave Harmon, and the food is fantastic.
Not 1, but 2. 112 Congress Street, 389 Broadway. Guaranteed to be a home run.
Missed one of our TV shows? No worries. Now you can catch all your favorite programs online. Simply log on to CapitalOTB.com and click on the YouTube link at the bottom of the homepage. And look for our new podcast coming soon. CapitalOTB.com. Log on today.
Welcome back to Loose on the Lead. Seth Merrow in the studio. Steve Vick via phone from down in the Philly area where he watched the racing at Parks yesterday. We covered that in the first segment. Now we'll touch on some racing news. And Steve, there was a couple of notable retirements over the past few days. Princess Asilmar retired, coming out of the poor effort in the Personal Ensign. They immediately thought about retirement. And then there was an excuse that came out. She had an electrolyte balance, or thumps as it's called, and it looked like she was going to continue racing. Well, it was taking her a little longer to recover. She was going to miss the Beldame. She was going to miss the Spinster. And when that happened, they decided just to call it a career with Princess Asilmar. So she's retired. And Game On Dude retires. And that was kind of interesting, too, because I thought, obviously there have been a couple of races that maybe weren't up to the Game On Dude of old. But you look back at that big cap earlier this year, and I still think he had it on his best day. But they came out of the last race, the Pacific Classic, and decided to call it a career with Game On Dude. And you mentioned Eric Guillot earlier. Probably the happiest person with this announcement that Game On Dude goes to the sidelines is Guillot, looking at Marino now maybe being lone speed in the Breeders' Cup Classic. But again, a couple of notable retirements this week.
Absolutely, and to take I guess Princess first. This is unfortunate, and I feel badly for Eddie Stanko, who has been so terrific, has been so generous with the public, and what he did going out to the distaff last year with Princess's Philmar, wanting to make sure that the public, had the opportunity to see her compete against, the best of her generation and the elders, and it cost them the championship, obviously. Yeah. And that was a noble gesture and so sporting, and that should earn everybody's respect and appreciation. On the flip side, the knock on the Fletcher camp is frequently the inability to maintain this kind of a horse, these horses at into their handicap season. I mean, this is on the heels of Palace Malice. I mean, are we going to let's fold him into this conversation? And it's great to take these horses and trade on their precociousness. That's great. For whatever reason, it seems that a chink in the armor is the inability to maintain them, past a certain point, and that I think is a failing that is very much open to being pointed out. It just is, and it's not trying to be hypercritical. Juxtapose it with Game On Dude, who leaves the stage late in his 7-year-old season. 7-year-old season, and this horse maintained a high level of performance from the time that Baffert and Bernie Schappa went after this horse to acquire him, and then from basically the Lone Star Derby to the last win, that Santa Anita handicap you mentioned, was he one-dimensional? Yeah, he's a one-dimensional horse. If he doesn't get things his way on the front end, it's hard for him to succeed. Okay, you know what he is, and he again was one of these horses, like we talked earlier, when he threw down the gauntlet, you had to either go after him or not. And if you didn't, and if he wasn't, if nobody was willing to challenge him, he would run you off your feet. And he built a very enviable career record. And you got to admire Schappa and Dotori and the Lanny family, who just felt that his competitive fire was dimming, and they weren't going to, continue just to run him for the sake of running him. And had Baffert on the show Friday. Had I thought a terrific conversation with him. He spoke for 20 minutes about having this kind of a horse in your barn for 4 years, and quite impressive. And I was never a huge fan of his, but I certainly admire him at this stage leading it.
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 notable retirements. Other really notable news, and again, we'll talk about this in a few minutes with Lynn Schneerson, the notable news over the past week. Potential end of racing at Suffolk, given the decision that was made as far as slots. For folks who haven't followed the story, there were 2 slots licenses up. Applications for slots licenses in the Boston area, only 1 would get it. And the folks at Suffolk were trying for one of those. Wynn Resorts was trying for the other one. The folks at Suffolk said if they didn't get it, they would probably end racing. Well, the decision by the Massachusetts Gaming Commission came out at the beginning of the week and went against Suffolk Downs. Subsequently, there's been a lot of fallout and obviously stories talking about the disappointment among all the folks involved at Suffolk Downs. But you and I talked on the radio on Wednesday. And yeah, the racing at Suffolk wasn't at the highest level, but this is a track that has a lot of history. The Mass Cap with horses like Skip Away and Cigar winning, and a racing venue in a major market. It's tough on racing to lose that kind of a venue. And I speculated on your show on Wednesday. I said, I'm not going to be surprised if something does. I think it's a long shot, but there isn't some talk about making continuing racing in some fashion somehow at Suffolk. Well, subsequently, that's come out that they're talking about potentially leasing the track to horsemen, or the Brockton Fair could pick up the race dates. Again, I think there may be some long shots for racing to continue in Massachusetts, but there is some talk out there. But again, the news earlier this week went against Suffolk Downs, and overall for racing, not good news.
This was in reality, this is a disgusting and completely political and money grab style execution. The only reason that there was going to ever be any alternative gaming in the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts was because of the work that Suffolk Downs did to keep the ball in the air for over 10 years. They got shot down repeatedly. And Richard Fields and Chip Tuttle, they kept the racetrack going. They kept the referendums on the ballot. They kept working with the legislature and the mayors of Boston and with the leaders and with the governor's office. This is disgusting. It's an obscenity because there wouldn't be any casinos in Massachusetts if it wasn't for Suffolk. And the further this is going, actually, now going on the week, the more angry people are getting, including me, because, whatever you want to say about it being a seat track, you have all the right points. This has a historic background of 3/4 of a century. It's the last holding of New England racing, and it absolutely didn't need to be this way, even if they wanted to give the deal to Wynn. And yes, there is that Thoroughbred Development Fund. You can talk to Lynn about that. That's going to shake off $140 million. There was no reason why a deal couldn't be made that satisfied both the Thoroughbred interest as well as whatever hand pocket machinations went on between Steve Wynn and the former governor of the state and a bunch of other hacks that always have their hands out whenever this happens. This is what went on here is really criminal, and nobody ever faces the feet to the fire. It always just moves on, and people are left in its wake. It's just a complete perversion.
Yeah, you make a great point, because that really is the story around the country over the past 10 or 15 years. This expanded gaming comes in the markets because of horse racing. That's the door it gets in through. And then you see things like up in Ontario, where then the government looks and says, wait a minute, there's a lot of money there. Maybe we can shut the horse racing. Now that it's in, we'll shut the horse racing industry. Yeah, you make a great point. And Steve, we only got a couple of minutes left, but I also wanted to touch on one other kind of disappointing story. And Quirky down in Fairgrounds. Fairgrounds talking about some fairly significant purse reductions and cuts on their stake schedule, but it's tied to pending litigation with the quarter horsemen there. They're talking about a 17% cut in purses for the season down at Fairgrounds, and they're going to lose 15 stakes races, going from 58 to 43 stakes. And as I said, it's kind of a quirky story, but not good news, obviously, for Fairgrounds.
It's a very strange scenario, and I'm only following Marcus Hirsch's take on it. Marcus explaining that what came about and what the background is on this ridiculous quarter horse lawsuit. He thought the thing was going to be dismissed, and I don't know if that meant being laughed away or Fairgrounds having to make a deal with the quarter horse industry. But the quarter horse people came into this after the fact, and they've got no right to that money, and but now it looks like they've got to face some litigation, so you can understand why they're holding that money in abeyance, the $2.7 million, just in case if it ends up in court and they end up losing and having to pay these quarter horse creeps this money. And every time you turn around, the quarter horse. I rarely come out and really say this. The quarter horse industry is just like a huge problem. Thoroughbred racing is the one that has to face all the glare about second careers and about what do we do with the unwanted horses. The horses that get slaughtered in this country 70% of them are from the quarter horse industry. And yet we're the ones, again, holding the bag. Every time you turn around, you got the quarter horse nonsense for licenses in Florida. I mean, they're something. They're amazing how often they crop up as a boil on the game.
Yeah, we'll have to see how this story shakes out as far as the fairgrounds is concerned, opening their meet right around the corner. Steve, got to wrap things up so I can get Lynn on the line here after the next break, but we appreciate the visit, the first-hand look at what Parks was like yesterday with their very big day, and enjoy the rest of your anniversary vacation and the trip to the Eagles this afternoon.
I appreciate it. Tomorrow, full coverage of the weekend and at the races, 9 a.m. Sirius XM.
Sounds good. Steve Bick from Sirius and XM's At the Races. Thanks for the visit. We'll take our next break, and when we come back, as promised, Lynn Schneerson, a little more of a closer look at this Suffolk situation right after this.
I don't know. You hang around here. What do you think?
The Capital OTB Handicapping Challenge Series is back. That's right. The 2014 Capital OTB Handicapping Challenge Series is back, and it's your chance to win thousands in cash and prizes, and a seat at the 2015 Handicapping Championship in Las Vegas. This month's contest is the Belmont Bet Fest on October 4th. So sign up today, online at capitalotb.com, or stop in at the Clubhouse Racebook.
Fascinated by the world of horse racing? Interested in honing your handicapping skills? Class is in session. Night school, Monday nights. Easy to access online. It's free, interactive, and informative for the casual and serious race fan. Horse Player Now Buzz. Live horses to watch emailed to you daily. Our eyes, your prize. Night school in the buzz. Visit horseplayernow.com for details.
I didn't want to get just any degree after high school.
Horse racing has always been my passion.
I was already a lawyer.
When I was young, my dad took me to the races. The sound of the crowd. I still remember.
I'm 40, and I don't want to stay in a career I don't love.
I want to follow my passion.
Follow your passion at the University of Arizona Racetrack Industry Program.
Hey race fans, head down to the all-new Clubhouse Racebook. With live horse racing on more than 250 flat-screen TVs, state-of-the-art wagering terminals, and amazing Vegas-style atmosphere. The Clubhouse Racebook, 711 Central Avenue, Albany.
Welcome back to Loose on the Lead. As promised before the break, we are joined now by Lynn Schneerson. She's been covering the Suffolk Downs situation in the Daily Racing Form. Also saw an article over in the Blood Horse as well, so you can catch up with her writing at those venues. But we have her on to talk a little bit about the situation firsthand this morning. Good morning, Lynn.
Good morning. How are you?
Very good. And let's get right into it. Just a few minutes ago, we touched on the issue a little bit with my co-host Steve Bick, and I set it up then as saying, for folks who weren't familiar, there was a couple of applications for one license for slot machines in the Boston area. That essentially went to Wynn and against Suffolk Downs, and the folks at Suffolk had already said without a casino they were probably going to wrap up racing. And Lynn, I'm just wondering, because for the Equidaily website, I've been following this story now for a few months, and I didn't get a real sense. Were the folks at Suffolk optimistic that it was going to go their way, or did they not have a feel?
Oh, everybody was optimistic, yeah. And the reason, one of the reasons being, is that the way the law was set up 2011 was there was 3 destination resort casino licenses that had to be located in 3 different geographical regions of the state, with Boston getting one of them. And then there was the slots parlor license, which was a standalone facility that could be located anywhere in the state. All right. So in February, Penn National Gaming was up against 2 competing proposals for the slots parlor that obviously did not have a racetrack. Penn National wanted to put it at the only harness racing track in the state, at Plain Ridge. And when that vote came down, although the commissioners, for the most part, all 5 of them at the time, agreed that the Cordish Company's proposal was by far the superior proposal, and met and did better job of meeting all the criteria established in the legislation, that they were going to give it to Penn National, because Penn National was going to buy the harness track, and then in essence would be saving the harness racing industry in Massachusetts and helping the horsemen and helping the breeders and preserving open farm space. So given that the harness racing industry in Massachusetts generates 10% of the revenue, the total racing revenue provided, and is a much smaller operation in terms of number of jobs, farms, etc., what have you, all across the board, where the thoroughbreds account for 90% of that industry, people were very optimistic. Well, if you're going to save the harness industry, of course you have to save the thoroughbred industry, but evidently that was not the thinking.
Yeah, and that's the sense I've gotten since then. They were pointed exactly to that, the slots license that went to kind of help the harness racing industry, and so people are now kind of aghast that they didn't save these jobs, and you're looking at all of these jobs that may go out the window now if Suffolk does wind up closing, which looks like it's going to be the situation. And it seems like maybe the Massachusetts Gaming Commission has kind of backtracked a little bit. They're now kind of addressing that after the fact. What's been the reaction over the past few days?
Well, they're taking an awful lot of heat from all quarters, as you can imagine. And, the media has been doing, a marvelous job of telling the story of the ramifications and the aftermath. But, we were saying, well, where were all these people before when we were trying to tell that story? But nonetheless, they're not going to change their mind. They're not going to revoke the license from Wynn. And they're not going to say, oh, gee, we changed our minds and now we're going to give it to Mohegan Sun. That's completely 100% off the table, because Mohegan did file a formal complaint at 10 o'clock the night the decision was handed down, and the Gaming Commission went back and said, far too little, far too late, and Mohegan asked if they could appeal, and then the commission told them, no, it's in the law that these decisions are final and not subject to appeal. So now the Gaming Commission is decided that they're going to hold this meeting, called a meeting for Thursday, in which they're going to address trying to, preserve the industry in Massachusetts. But again, they're, way too little, far too late. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens at this meeting, because there's not another thoroughbred racetrack in the state.
And since then, and I kind of speculated on this, in the first 24 hours after the decision was made, there was obviously the despair at Suffolk itself, and as you say, within the media. And I kind of speculated. I looked at Monmouth a couple of years ago when they were having trouble. Eventually, somebody came forward, talked about buying the track. The horsemen got together and made some overtures as well. Well, since then, the Brockton Fair has said they may apply for the racing dates, but now they're also talking about potential horsemen leasing the racetrack. I'm looking at these as maybe long shot efforts, but you're more on the scene. Give me some of your feel on what the potential is moving forward.
All right. Well, Brockton is. I had a long talk with Chris Carney the other day, as I wrote for Both the Blood, because I am the New England correspondent for both the Blood Horse and the Form. So I wrote the story for both publications. So the Brockton Fair is going to show up on when the dates applications are due, October 1st. They're going to apply for one fair date for this year. Okay. Then they're also going to apply for a 60-day meet at the fairgrounds for 2015. Sterling Suffolk Racecourse, the owner of Suffolk, is not applying for 2015 dates. So I don't know what's going to happen with Brockton, if the commission will approve their dates. I can't imagine at this stage they wouldn't, because there is no other track. I, of course, called Penn National immediately. It was one of the first phone calls that I made to see if they would be interested in putting in a 1 mile oval and a turf course at their new $225 million Racino, and I was told that that is not in the plans. There isn't even room for it, even if they're stretched out to the max on the property as it is, and they have no interest in building a brand new thoroughbred track anywhere else in the state. So I would imagine that the commission would grant the dates to Brockton, just so there would be a place for some horsemen if they choose that they want to go there. But one of the reasons that the legislation talks about that a track has to be, not a fair track, but a racetrack has to be 1 mile oval to preserve and protect the integrity and the quality of the racing product. I mean, I think the owner of the Brockton Fair told me the other day that his track is 6 furlongs. I actually, looking back at it, I think it's a half-mile track. So, I mean, you know, we want to talk about the entire intent of the legislation in protecting the racing industry was to improve and upgrade the quality of racing and the quality of mass breds in the state. So you're not going to do that if you're running at a fairground with a half-mile track.
And you know, they're applying. Talk a little bit about there is a Thoroughbred Development Fund, and that's tied into what this casino money as well?
It is. When the legislation was enacted, when it was passed, the racetrack and the racing industry fought very hard to make sure that the industry would be protected in the face of the coming casino competition in the state. I mean, it's you know, obviously they can't survive even without casinos. So the Racehorse Development Fund was established to be funded by 5% of the license fees for the 3 resort casinos and the 1 slots parlor. That's $175 million in total, so they get 5% of that. Then they also get 9% of all of the slots machine revenue from the slots parlor, and about 0.5%, 6.25, of the combined total revenues from the 3 casinos when they come online. So right now, there's money there from the $25 million license, $50 million license fee from the slots, $50 million from the slots parlor. No, I'm sorry, it's 25 from the slots parlor, 50 for the casinos. So eventually there will be money in that fund, and 80% of that money has to be designated for purses. So the horsemen will have money. Kind of right now, we're in a situation where the horsemen have no money but no racetrack. The racetrack has track but no money. So this is where we are. So it's kind of it is a long shot. Last night, Chip Tuttle had a meeting with the horsemen, as I reported, and told them that if there is a program, a plan that would be economically feasible, and or but, then the owners of the racetrack would keep an open mind about leasing the track to the horsemen, a la, as is done in Monmouth. But it's a long way from here to there. You've got to, they're going to have to raise an awful lot of money to be able to float a meet.
And what was, or is there? Did you mention, was there a drop-dead date as far as applying for dates next year?
October 1st. And
would the Gaming Commission, is it possible they would extend that given the circumstances?
That's a very good question. We don't know. We would have to find out on Thursday when they address the issue. That's an extremely good question. We'll find out more, I guess.
Yeah, it is an interesting, unfortunate, sad situation up there. And certainly, if things are going to wind up, I have never made a visit up there, and I'm only a few hours away. I said we have, I guess there's maybe 6 racing days left, and so I'm going to have to make
4 now. 4.
My first and last visit one of these days and get up there.
Feel free. I've got a guest suite. You can stay at my house. You want to come visit?
All right. Well,
yeah, I'm saying they're talking now. September 29th was originally the end date of the meet, but they're talking now of extending it to putting an extra day on and making that day October 4th, which would be a Saturday, because they feel it would be a more fitting send-off to the track. That more people could come and they could, we could do more around it.
Yeah, and I've said, I said it last week when we talked about this story, and I said earlier, for folks who are maybe new to the game and don't remember, this is a historic venue. The Mascap for years and years was a real spot on the calendar in the handicap division, and you had horses like Cigar and Skip Away, and so folks may not realize how important Suffolk Downs was, and it's just unfortunate. We hope maybe something can be worked out up there. We will certainly keep in touch with it through your writing at both the Racing Forum and the Blood Horse. Lynn, we appreciate the visit this morning.
Thank you. If I can just get in very quickly. The Mascap was extremely important, particularly before there was a Breeders' Cup Classic.
Yeah, absolutely. And folks can pull up, go on the internet and pull up the list of winners of the Mascap, and it's a who's who of racing going back a long time. And really, if you look up in the whole of New England and throw in Rockingham and the important race they had up there and the fair circuit, it's just unfortunate what has happened to racing in New England. So again, we'll keep a little bit optimistic that maybe something good can happen. But again, Lynn, we appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day. And do let me know if you're coming to Suffolk. So I'd love to escort you around and show you some of the memorabilia and the beautiful history that is in that building.
Absolutely, will do. Thanks a lot, Lynn.
Okay, take care. Thank you. Bye.
All right, Lynn Sneerson again. You can catch her writing on the topics at the Racing Forum or the Blood Horse. Just want to, if I can pull up the PPs, I had a couple of races that I wanted to look at here at the end of the show, and maybe we can at least take a look at one of those. And I'm not sure what I did with the PPs, so we will. I'll just. Oh, wait, I've got them right here, as I thought I did. We will take a look at, if the guys can pull it up, the first replay I had, and that's the one I want to look at, the Gallant Bloom from yesterday, and I wanted to show that. Jeff and I talked a little bit about it on the Handicappers Report. Just wanted to show that because it is Artemis Agritera coming out of that really devastating victory in the Ballerina with the 103 Beyer figure up at Saratoga last time. Artemis Agritera in this field of 6 yesterday, facing off against the very talented sprinter La Verdad, the number 6 horse. La Verdad goes out and not only gets the lead, La Verdad opens up on the field, making it look like a lot of work for number 1 Artemis Agritera. And as you can see, coming from the back of the pack is Artemis Agritera. Fort Chester and Mary Broman, Rajiv Mirage on board here. Even at this point, it seems like it's not going to happen from our Artemis Agritera. But keep your eyes on a really, really nice performance yesterday in the Grade 2 $300,000 Gallant Bloom handicap. It is a handicap. Both of these horses were carrying 118. Nice job from Artemis Agritera getting it done yesterday in the Gallant Bloom. If the guys can maybe skip the Divine Oath race and get to the Charlestown Oaks, we can show that as well. And I just wanted to show that because it is our buddy Phil Schoenthal, who sat in with me here on the show on Racing Across America up at Saratoga as this one was getting ready to run up there, and Misbehavior out of a second place finish behind Stone-tastic in the stakes race up at Saratoga. I saw Phil Schoenthal in the winner's circle after that, and I said, you weren't going to beat that horse today. Stone-tastic just freaked up at Saratoga, and Phil said, yeah, I know, but I'm happy with the second place for my horse. And he said at that point, we're going to the Charlestown Oaks next, and here you see Misbehavior for Phil Schoenthal getting it done really convincingly as the even money favorite last night down at Charlestown in the Grade 3 $500,000 Charlestown Oaks. So there you see a couple of nice performances on the distaff side in the Gallant Bloom from Artemis Agritera, 3-year-old filly, and another 3-year-old filly, Misbehavior. And again, I talked to Phil Schoenthal, and it sounded like they really, the Charlestown Oaks was next on the agenda, but it also sounded like they have a nice 4-year-old campaign hoped for and planned for Misbehavior. So a couple of horses certainly we'll keep our eyes on going forward. All of which brings us up to a full edition, the end of a full edition of Loose on the Lead. I'm Seth Merrill. In here in the studio, as I said earlier, and as we talked to earlier, my co-host Steve Bick was down in the Philly area. He was at Parks yesterday, headed to the Eagles game this afternoon, but we had him by phone at the top of the show to do a little recap on the Parks racing and some of the news. We're here with Loose on the Lead every Sunday morning from 10 till 11 a.m. Don't forget, we would love to hear questions, comments, suggestions. You can get in touch with us at looseonthelead@yahoo.com. We would love to hear from you, regardless of what you have to say. If you have a suggestion, if you have a thought, if you have a question, let us know. looseonthelead@yahoo.com. A little bit earlier, Jeff Carl and I did the Handicappers Report, taking a look at Monmouth and Belmont, but a couple of the tracks that you'll be able to enjoy this afternoon. But hopefully we gave you some good information. So here's the game plan. Enjoy the races, cash a few tickets, and I'll be back in tomorrow morning for the Handicappers Report and Racing Across America. We'll see you then.
You're watching OTB TV, a service of Capital Off Track Betting.